Hello and welcome to the Now Spinning Magazine podcast with me, Phil Aston. And this is episode 2 of Meet the Collector. And on this episode, I have Scott Lade from the Prog Corner. Hi, Scott.
Phil, how you doing, man? Thanks for having me on. This is awesome. This is a dream come true. My dog's even excited. I don't know if you heard that. I got 2 dogs sitting here next to me. They love it when we shoot videos, but sometimes they bark. So I apologize in advance.
That's okay. Right.
It's too cold outside for them to be out. It's like 20 degrees Fahrenheit out right now. So that's no good.
Well, that's interesting. It's very cold here as well in Cornwall in the UK where I am. Now, one of the things I said we're going to talk about, Scott, is you have picked your top 5 prog albums. And I have to say, before you say what they are, I was thinking, he didn't even say 5. Are you joking? How am I supposed to count 5? You just went, yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
so this is
you know how it
interesting.
is. YouTube was driven by listicles and doing rankings, top 5s, top 10s. So yeah, it's right in my wheelhouse, man.
Cool. All right then. So are you going to do these in the order of 5 to 1, or are they all equal in your standpoint?
No, they're not equal, man. I rank everything. I've got like a slight version of OCD. I'm on the spectrum. So I rank everything. Like if I'm at a restaurant, I'm going to rank, well, let's see what order. Well, I like the peas. Those are in 5th place and the potatoes are in 4th and the steak was a little overdone. So that's in 3rd. I rank everything, man. It's terrible. It's just, obviously I was perfect for YouTube with this weird brain of mine. So
you were born for YouTube, obviously. That's right.
Yeah, I just had my 3rd anniversary on YouTube. Very exciting that we've been able to grow the channel and grow the community. And like I said, there's a lot of cross-pollination between a lot of the creators that I enjoy. And I know my audience loves your channel because you always rank on my top 10. Other channels your audience watches. So this is going to be great. I definitely want to pilfer some of your subscribers today too. Subscribe to the Prog Corner. If you like Phil, you may like me.
They may well do that.
Right, my dog bit me yesterday. Look at that.
That looks rough. So, Scott, what is album number 5, your 5th and your top prog albums of all time?
Yeah, this actually, I make it sound easy, but it was not. But,
no.
I thought long and hard about including a modern prog album because I love 21st century prog. I love the spirit and the vibe of, a lot of these modern bands. But I'm going with 5 classics, Phil. I'm not monkeying around today. Oh, and at number 5, man, from 1973, this band's 4th studio album. It's Brain Salad Surgery with the awesome Geiger album cover. This thing is amazing. Greg Lake wanted to call this album Whip Some Skull on You, but apparently Amit Erdogan over at Atlantic wasn't crazy about it because I guess it means something else. It's British slang. But this is a dark album after the brightness of Trilogy with the Eddie Offord production that just sounded so crisp and clean and perfect and nuanced. This thing's just ugly and nasty, and it's got ugly sounds, and it's not produced really crystal clean like their last couple records. And it absolutely fits the mood. Dark, depressing, dystopian future. Lyrics of Carnival 9 written by the late, great Pete Sinfield, who we just lost over the last weekend. One of my favorite albums. And it's the first time you see the ELP logo.
That's very true.
Yeah. This album, you could make a case for any of the early ELP albums. But I love Brain Salad Surgery. I think Carnival 9 is one of the greatest pieces of art ever recorded. And then you got Jerusalem and Toccata. Maybe Benny the Bouncer brings it down just a smidge, but I love the comical ELP side. They weren't just all like, super serious all the time, serious musos. They had a good sense of humor, Greg Lake. He was always standing on a $20,000 Persian rug.
That's very true.
Keith Emerson with the cod pieces. Carl Palmer with the not one gong but 2 gongs. And come on, man! It was so over the top that those little humorous parts that they brought to their music. Really rounds this thing out. Brain Salad Surgery,
So,
1973,
so,
Emerson, Lake and Palmer. I got it at number 5, Phil.
but just before we move on to number 4, was that your entry point for Emerson, Lake and Palmer?
It actually was not.
Ah,
My entry point to Prog in general was actually, I take it back to Christmas break 1975. My brother was away at university. He comes back for the holidays with a cassette tape, a Memorex 90-minute tape. One side had Fragile on it. The other side had Tarkus. And that was it for me, man. I was a prog rocker. My life was set in motion from that day forward. So yeah, Tarkus was my entry point with Emerson, Lake and Palmer. But I still think Brain Salad Surgery is their masterpiece.
I would I would agree with that, because that was my entry point.
Really?
Even though I'm slightly older than you, it was
like 3 years, right? You're 65.
Yeah, I kind of felt that, because I was listening to Purple and Sabbath and Zeppelin, and there was a kid at school that said, "You got to listen to ALP, Phil," and I was they'd already been around, and the New Musical Express had released a flexi disc of.
Oh yeah.
I think it was what was on that? Was it
I think
Jerusalem?
it was Jerusalem.
Yeah, Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Which I just thought, this band have done a score hymn. What they do, what they're thinking of, and it was all these strange keyboard sounds. But I would agree that over the years, it has become my favorite ELP album.
Yeah. It's just, I think it's the one where they swing for the fences, you know? It's the one where they just let it all hang out and just be exactly who they wanted to be. They had Still You Turn Me On as a little sop to, the singles
Yeah, but it's
market.
good. Yeah, it's good stuff.
But overall, this was just pure, unadulterated, pompous, pretentious prog rock at the absolute highest level. ELP, I got at number 5.
Yeah. Did you carry on with the catalog after that? Like Works 2 and.
Yeah, I've got them all, and I did carry on with them. Although, Works Volume 1 was the first ELP tour I went to, which was absolutely mind blowing, because they had the 60-piece orchestra, they had the 30-voice choir. They had to streamline that after the tour went through. They were losing money hand over fist, like losing $1 million a night. So they had to streamline, but I was lucky enough to catch the full thing. Unbelievable. The concert opened with Piano Concerto number 1.
So
Who opens a rock concert with that?
You saw Piano Concerto number 1 with an orchestra.
Yeah. They opened the concert with
that.
Yeah, no one was prepared for that. I don't think anybody was expecting that, but it was just an amazing show. Mind-blowing
don't you
musicianship. Think, so good.
I felt that now, I've mentioned this before on my channel, I've talked about Emerson, Lake and Palmer, that now that Piano Concerto number 1 is a masterpiece in modern classical music. The time, I don't think the audience was old enough or mature enough to understand the brilliance of what was happening around them. Now, older, looking back at it, I realize it was amazing. Over here in the UK, they were seen as dinosaurs, and punk was coming along, and it was saying, who wants to listen to this overblown stuff? But actually, they were breaking through barriers where the classical world at that time saw them as, rock artists can't do this stuff. But now I feel that in particular, the Piano Concerto is just mind-blowing.
And it is interesting, because Emerson, Lake and Palmer had always had classical influences. They from Bartok to Bach to Toccata on ELP, Brain Salad Surgery. I mean, they always used Aaron Copland's music.
Yeah,
so I was a little surprised that the average ELP listener kind of turned their back on Works Volume 1, because it's a great album. Now I understand not liking Works Volume 2 or Love Beach, but Works Volume 1's great.
Yeah. Fantastic choice, Scott. So where are we going for number 4?
Well, people that know my channel, the first thing they see before they even click on is my avatar, which was strategically picked because A, it's round, so it fits the little circle where you put your face in or whatever. And B, it's one of my favorite albums of all time. It's Larks, Tongues, and Aspic by King Crimson, their 5th album, their first, with the John Wetton lineup. This is just everything I want King Crimson to be. I love the first four albums. I really do, but it just felt like they hadn't really figured it out yet. I mean, it was all this meandering from the weird jazziness of Lizard to the laid back nature of Islands to the pure replication of In the Wake of Poseidon. This thing was its own beast. I had never heard anything like this before. Full disclosure, I bought it because on the back it says Bill Bruford plays on it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so I was a big Yes fan at this point, but I had only heard the first King Crimson album, and honestly, it didn't make a huge impression on me back in the day. This one did, though, man. I mean, the album cover frightened me. The music frightened me. I'm still a little scared of Larks, Tongues, and Aspic Part 1 with that violin going with David Cross, that staccato violin, and, you know, the tension starts building and it gets all crazy. It's still scary. I mean, King Crimson is a dangerous place, and this is their most dangerous album. And I just adore every single note of it. I love the next two, Starless and Bible, Black and Red. All three of the Wettin' albums are fantastic. But hey, this has got the full 5-man lineup. This is the only album with this lineup. So yeah, Larks, Tongues, and Aspic, my fourth favorite album of all time.
Interesting. And I mean, what are your how do you feel about John Wetton? Because he went on, his voice was beyond prog, wasn't it? It was like this beautiful, velvety chocolate vocals that could just melt hearts. I mean, did you follow his career? Right? Did you follow his career through UK and Asia? And
I mean, you look back at Wetton all the way back from Family, and he toured with Annie Haslam and Renaissance back in like 1972 or something like that. I don't know, during that transition period. And then you got all those bands he was in. Uriah Heep he was in for a while. He was in Roxy Music. This guy was just everywhere. So, you know, when he landed up in King Crimson, it was really nice to finally hear him get a chance to sing, because he was primarily just playing bass for all these bands. So he got a chance to sing with King Crimson, and that voice, man, you knew that guy was going to be big, right? You knew that guy was going to have a number one hit with some band at some point, and it took Asia for it to happen. But the voice, man. But no one really talks about John Wetton's bass playing, because he is incredible. Not just the note selection, but the tone. Nobody played bass like John Wetton, man. Just scary good.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. Big fan. Love John Wetton. Love that band. You know, King Crimson, I saw them recently right before they decided to call it a day with the 3 drummers up front. You know, they never disappoint.
And have you followed Bruford as well? Because obviously you said that was one of the things, because obviously Bruford has also in later years had his earthworks and jazz stuff. Is that something that you also were into?
I like some of the Bruford stuff, but I'm not a huge jazz guy. So to be honest, I like the Bruford albums, you know, where he had Jeff Berlin and Alan Holdsworth in tow. But you know, once he started the earthwork stuff, there was Precious Little Rock, and that was pretty much just straight up jazz.
That's true.
Incredible stuff, but I'm not a jazz guy. I like it, but that's my dad's arena.
Interesting.
My dad's the jazz guy. He could break down any chart, tell you exactly what's going on in any jazz standard, but that's not me.
That's cool. Right. So we're entering number 3 now.
Woo, number 3. It's getting tough now. Number 3. We're going to the year 1972, Phil. And this was one of the records I heard about the same time my brother came back from college with that world famous cassette tape. I was in a mall. I was in the Brookfield Square Mall in Wisconsin, doing a little Christmas shopping. It's 1975, and they're playing music in there, and they're playing this. They're playing Thick as a Brick. And I'd never heard anything like this before, because, you know, Jethro Tull had hits. You know, I knew, Living in the Past and Teacher, and they'd had a couple hits in the U.S., Aqualung and Cross-Eyed Mary, stuff like that. But this thing here, man, it's one song, 40 minutes long. The crazy thing about this album, Phil, not only is that it's just absolutely amazing, this thing hit number 1 in the U.S. One song, 40 minutes long, hit number 1. And then the next year, they go ahead and drop a Passion Play, which is one song, 40 minutes long. It, too, hit number 1 in the U.S. What in the world was going on in the 70s, man? There was something in the water. People were listening to serious music. People had an attention span, right, to listen to a 40-minute piece of music, because you can't really drop the needle, halfway and Thick as a Brick. You got to listen to it from start to finish. Otherwise, it does not make sense. And man, I long for those glory years where something like this could top the charts. It's a miracle that it did. One of the greatest albums of all time. And I'm on record as saying that the last 90 minutes of this album, Phil, is the best 90 seconds of recorded music I've ever heard. Is the last 90 seconds of Thick as a Brick. Just incredible the way the orchestra swells, and then the acoustic guitar comes in at the end, and then you're done. And like that acoustic section at the end is only like 10 seconds long. So what does it make you want to do? It makes you want to flip it over and start all over again. Just genius. Just absolutely incredible. Third best album I've ever heard.
What's interesting talking to you, Scott, is that obviously the US, both the the three bands you've mentioned so far, I feel, were bigger in the US than they were in the UK.
Yeah, I think a lot of managers, and I think Jethro Tull can take some credit in this. I think a lot of people that were managing bands like ELP and Yes and Genesis were looking at the success Tull had, because Tull had been touring the U.S. since 1970 to huge crowds. They were selling out. And so they realized, wow, if you can somehow, some way break the U.S. market, that is the road to fame and fortune. And that's why bands like Gentle Giant and Renaissance, who did not necessarily break the U.S. market, but it wasn't for lack of trying. Those two bands were touring the U.S. almost constantly throughout the 70s. Didn't work for them, but it did work for Yes. It did work for Genesis. It did work for ELP. It worked for Jethro Tull. And that's where the money is at, right? I mean, you crack that U.S. market, and, the streets are paved with gold over here, Phil, man. And that's what they were thinking,
Yeah,
they were figuring if they could crack the U.S., the whole world would open up. And they weren't wrong.
They weren't wrong. Over here, I think there was a lot of pressure for them to do albums like War Child, where they had shorter tracks, because over here, an album with one song was like very difficult for us Brits to get our head around. We were kind of in a different space, and even ELP was seen as kind of, there was Genesis, and then there was Floyd, and then we have the harder rock bands. But the bands like Jethro Tull were even though they were very English, it was quite difficult for us, thinking back to when I was that age, to find them that accessible, especially, ironically, the two albums you've mentioned, Passion Play and Thick as a Brick, were probably the most inaccessible Tull albums to me growing up than they are now. In fact, I'll be honest, it wasn't until the first remaster that I sat down properly to listen to Thick as a Brick and thought, wow, I've had this all wrong.
Really?
Yeah, really. I mean, I've got them.
And it is interesting, because it's not only like, if you analyze, okay, these British bands, they conquered America, but, there was another facet to that. It's a relationship. It's a two-way street. The longer you spent in America, right, plying your trade, opening for bands, going all over the country, America's going to start talking to you. America's going to influence you. All these bands that attempted to conquer America, they were influenced by American music. They were influenced by American DJs and what they wanted to play. And they were definitely influenced by the audiences that they were playing for night after night. So their music kind of became less British. And I think the best example of that is probably Genesis. If you listen to Nursery Crime, a record that maybe sold 50,000 copies in the US, it doesn't get much more British than that. But by the time they started actually selling some units, all that quaint Englishness had kind of been sanded down and taken out of their music for the most part. And then they started selling millions of copies. So
yeah,
turn American.
Yeah, you also mentioned for young viewers watching this, is that when you work in the land of all the streaming you do, and you've got the attention span of listening to the first 30 seconds of each track to decide whether you're going to go any further, you have no idea when you've got a track that's literally 40 minutes long what you're missing.
Yeah. And you know what? Honestly, with the proliferation of music on streaming services and on YouTube and stuff like that, the kids, if they hear about it, they don't have to buy the record. They can just go on their streaming service and check it out. So there's a whole new audience that's we've been told that the younger folks are all TikToked out and they got the attention span of a gnat. Don't believe it, man.
No,
don't believe it. I've got so many young people coming onto my channel, commenting, saying, man, I'm 14 years old. I'm 15 years old. I just discovered Yes. And my life has changed, man. And I'm like, oh, yeah, there is hope. There's hope, Phil. There is.
Great. That's what we like to hear. My favorite Tull album is actually Minstrel in the Gallery from 75. Is mine.
Baker Street Muse.
Baker Street, yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
I love that album.
Yeah.
I think I had that at number 5 when I did my Tull ranking.
Very interesting. So we're moving out from Tull now. Where we
number
heading
2
next?
now.
Yeah.
Woo. Well, anybody that's been watching my channel for a while knows that there are 2 albums that I hold in such high esteem that every other record just pales by comparison. Every other record. There's 2.
Okay.
But at number 2, I'm going with The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. And I know people could, make a case for Foxtrot. They could make a case for Selling England by the Pound. I love a Trick of the Tail too, Wind and Wuthering. I think those are great records, but this is the one right here. Number 1, it's a double album, so you get twice as much music. Duh, if Nursery Crime and Foxtrot were one album, there's a good chance I'd have that at number 1. More is better. It's prog rock, people. Not a Duff moment on here. Don't let anybody tell you, oh, it could have been a single album. It would have been better. One of the complaints I hear is that the band was running out of time. They had a very strict time limit. So, in fact, they felt side 3 and 4 were not quite as completed as sides 1 and 2. You do kind of hear that. It is almost like 2 sides of a coin if you pay close attention. But that's kind of the magic of sides 3 and 4 is they're not quite as clean sounding. They're almost unfinished at times. But you end a double concept album with It, one of the weirdest songs of all time. It's masterful. I love everything about this. Probably because I'm American. I understand it more than Selling England by the Pound, which is a lot of people's favorite Genesis album. But honestly, I don't really get it, man. I'm an American. I don't, for years and years, I thought he was talking about Selling England by the Pound. Why is he weighing money? I don't understand. Oh, a pound. Okay. Yeah, that's your money. I don't get half the stuff Peter Gabriel's singing. But on The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, it's based in Broadway. It's based in New York. So there's a real American feel to it. And I really appreciate that. So I guess that might be why I prefer it. But I love everything about The Lamb. I love the story. I love how ridiculous it is. And what a way for Peter Gabriel to go out of the band, right? I mean, if he had to have a swan song like, see you guys later, boy, talk about going out on a high note. Wow.
I think it's an album that continues to deliver and show up its secrets even after all these years. I think the others are obviously, there's lots of different layers to them, but I think this one, because there's so much going on. I mean, when you first get it, when I first ever bought it, and I just heard about it. I hadn't heard it because obviously I'm going back to when there wasn't no YouTube, it wasn't on the radio, and coming home with it on the bus and the cover and all that text.
Yeah,
what's going on here? What's this about? And
Phil Collins has said he's never once read it. He said, that whole thing in the gatefold that Peter wrote. He's like, I've never read it.
Yeah, I mean, the band themselves were going through personal breakups in their families and their wives and all sorts of stuff going on. But I was very lucky to talk to Steve Hackett about this. But I think they all look back at it now and realize that it was a monumental piece of work, that even though what was going on, they probably think, oh, well, I don't know what everyone's going to think about this, but I think it has stood the test of time, hasn't it?
And there's a couple points you made. One is the reward of repeat listens, because the mix is really weird. I've heard of several different versions of it, and they're all bizarre because in many, many places, Steve Hackett's doing amazing stuff, but it's like really buried in the mix or panned hard to the left, and you really got to focus on what Steve's doing. that kind of adds to the charm of it. It really keeps me going back and listening over and over and over. And you talked about the stresses and the tensions within the band. Nobody wanted Peter Gabriel to write all the lyrics. Peter Gabriel was the only one that wanted Peter Gabriel to write all the lyrics because, Mike and Tony had been writing actually the majority of the lyrics up until The Lamb. And Peter just had this power trip. He'd been contacted by David Friedkin and these directors in Hollywood. So he was thinking he was going to be all this, that, and the other thing. So he was like, you know what? I'm taking over here. And thank goodness he did, because what a great story, great lyrics. You couldn't have shared songwriting or shared lyric credits on a piece like this. It had to come from one brain, and it came from the deranged brain of Peter Gabriel. The tensions in the band definitely were mounting at this time. And you talk to the other guys in the band, and they're like, the real problem here was that Peter had a kid, and we didn't have kids yet. We didn't understand what that does. And apparently his child was ill. And that took Peter away from the band a lot, as anyone with children would understand. The other guys in the band didn't have kids. They didn't understand. They're like, man, Pete's not in the band. So when he finally decided to quit, they were actually kind of happy, because they didn't think he was all in. Years later, once they all had kids, they're like, oh, I get it now. Maybe we were a little too hard on Peter.
Yeah. So, are you looking forward to the deluxe version that's coming out next year, with a remix and a big box?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't normally spend a lot of money on that kind of stuff, but it's The Lamb. it's coming with me. Yeah, I got to have that. One of the greatest albums of all time. And, the band kept going strong. The momentum was still there. What an incredible band. I can make a case that Genesis never put out a bad album.
Yeah, I can go with that. Yeah. I think Trick of the Tail is probably my favorite Gabriel one, and Lamb Lies Down is my favorite overall Genesis album. Good man. And I've said for years that Peter Gabriel sang on A Trick of the Tail, it would be everyone's favorite Genesis album. It's that good. Yeah, exactly. But I do like Lamb Lies Down, because there are still elements of it which every time I play it takes on a different meaning. Even now, I think it's a dense, complex album with so many different facets to it. I do agree that sometimes when I've played it, there's been certain tracks on side 3 I've thought, I kind of push through that. But then another time I'll play it and it makes more sense.
Yeah,
I think it's kind of like it's a living piece of music, that it's something that I don't think you tire of. You have to set aside a certain amount of time and just sit down and just immerse yourself with it, really.
And it's not even musically that you have to pick up on certain things. The story is really convoluted. In fact, I'd been listening to The Lamb for probably 10 years before I realized what Dr. Diaper was doing and what a windshield wiper signified.
Yeah.
Doc the Dick. What are we talking about? Oh, no, we're not talking about that. Oh, no, that raven's going to fly away with my thingy. Oh, no, man. Yeah. So there's so much to discover, so much fun. It's such an exciting album. And what a great conclusion. Again, what a way to send off Peter Gabriel into his solo career. My second favorite album of all time, Phil.
Okay.
Hard to believe there's one I like more. I'm so passionate about The Lamb.
So there is one remaining from your top 5 prog albums of all time. What is it going to be? Who is the band?
Well, Yes is my all-time favorite band. There's just something about that band that when I first heard them, the strains of Roundabout coming through my headphones when I put that Memorex 90 on, and that my brother brought home from college, and I've never looked back. They are my favorite band. They make me angry. I hate them almost as much as I love them, as you can only do with something you have so much passion about. That's my band. They'll always be my band, and my favorite album from them. Oh, we're keeping the double album theme going.
Whoa, oh my God.
Oh yeah, it's the Mighty Tales from Topographic Oceans, and I see it there, right next to your Marillion there.
Well, I
Ah.
didn't know that Scott was going to mention that, but it just happens to be
How
out.
about that? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I have a thing for double albums. Being a prog type person, I've always gravitated towards longer pieces of music. And the double album to me is where bands can just do whatever they want, right? You don't have as much restrict. Oh, you only got 20 minutes on each side. If you got 4 sides, you don't have to worry about that as much. The Beatles' White Album proved what that concept could really be. You could be a little looser. You could let your hair down. You could let it all hang out, show all the different sides of your band. And that's why I love the Clash's London Calling. That's why I love the Minutemen's Double Nickels on a Dime. That's why I just love double Quadrophenia. Come on, man. Some of the greatest albums of all time have been double albums, and the best of them all is Tales from Topographic Oceans. Stephen Wilson called this hardcore Yes. And he's absolutely right, man. Everything that makes Yes great is here, but in a weird, like elongated, drunken, opiate-filled kind of haze. I don't know what these guys were thinking about, but apparently Steve Howe and John Anderson were just, touring around the world and late nights in hotel rooms. They were just putting this thing together. They wrote the whole thing, so there's probably not as much Chris Squire dominated stuff. That's the only negative I could say about it. Everything else, the album's perfect. When I first bought it, I really didn't like it, Phil. I thought it was garbage, man. I didn't like it at all.
I was waiting for that gap, you see, because for me personally, especially here in the UK, this album was like we have Marmite as a food here. You either like it or you hate it.
Yeah.
And this album really split people down the middle. And I mean, we know these legendary stories of Rick Wakeman eating fish and chips while it was in certain parts of it on stage. I mean, it was there were lots of people who found they liked some of it, but I think it was side 3. But a lot of people just thought that's
side 3. I think is. First of all, Phil, it was Chicken Vindaloo. It was the Vindaloo. And I can just imagine John Anderson's face, and he's trying to sing all this weird stuff, and the smell of this Indian food wafting on stage. And, Rick obviously did not like the album. He was dead wrong. He's still dead wrong about it. Some of his very best work is on Tales from Topographic Oceans. Dude, get the earwax out of your ears. Listen to it again. Admit you're wrong, Rick. It's one of the greatest achievements in the history of mankind. And I would say it is the greatest achievement in the history of mankind. I am a Christian, Phil, and probably the number one piece of evidence I have that there is a God is that human beings could create Tales from Topographic Oceans. I am dead serious about it. Like I said, I didn't like it at all, man. I had Relayer, and I had the Yes album, and I had Fragile, Close to the Edge Yes songs. I finally got around to Tales in like 76, and man, it just didn't do anything for me. I liked side 1. But Yes was my favorite band, so I was not going to give up. So I listened to this thing hundreds and hundreds of times. Then I started liking side 4. It took probably a few years to actually like sides 2 and 3. And right now, I think side 2, The Remembering, the most underrated piece of music I've ever heard. It's a little languid at first and slow, but it needs to be to get to that climax, man, that come to Buddha moment that you can only get with that intricate buildup. That's not accidental. You don't reach the highest of highs just, we kind of sort of happened into it. No, you didn't, man. That was all planned. Rick Wakeman was dead wrong. Tales is the greatest album of all time. It's hardcore Yes. It's everything I want from Yes. And people that say it should have been a single album, poppycock. People that say that Bill Bruford would have made it a better album. You're dead wrong, man. Bruford wouldn't have known what to do on that album. This was Alan White's debut, and he just owns it, man. He's playing like he's been in this band for 10 years already. It's just ridiculous how good Alan White is on this album. I just love it. It's a perfect 10. My favorite album of all time. I'll die on this hill. And I know there's a lot of people that don't like it and prefer Close to the Edge or Relayer of the Yes album. That's great. That's fine. Because honestly, from the Yes album to Relayer, Yes was absolutely perfect. That's 5 perfect albums in a row. Genesis maybe did it also, but not many bands can say they put out 5 perfect albums in a row. And for my money, this album in the UK almost. We had a music paper called the New Musical Express, and I think this album was seen as what caused punk rock. Yeah, it was seen as that. It was like the
Well, that's it. We're done. We've got to. Someone has got to stop this happening now. We've got people. We've got people releasing double albums with only one track aside, and this has got to end. And what's it about? It's kind of about some kind of yogi who's gone up some kind of mountains. What is going on here? So, and I think it's almost put together. Give me 10 reasons why Prog had to die. People go, this.
Yeah.
I even know
Exhibit A.
There was even a story in the press where somebody wanted to get someone to move out of the flat from underneath them. So they played this at full volume for 2 weeks. And in the end, they just left.
Oh, that's great.
But I agree. The Yes album was my entry point. Accessible, easy. Fragile was. Relayer was a bit more difficult for me. My favorite album by Yes was Going for the One. And I kind of leapt over this one. Oh, it's that double one.
Yeah.
And then I went around someone's house and they played, could have been side 3. And I thought, what is this? And then it was later on. And I thought, it's when I'm going to give this a go. And I maybe understood it lyrically better. I think it is like a spiritual journey in it.
Thank you. It's like going to church, man. It's like going to a church service.
And you can tell because John Anderson is a very spiritual person. He's I love his lyrics. His positivity, the way he puts things across. Now, and this is a brand new pressing.
Yeah,
I love it.
Good. I'm glad you came around, and I understand all those people that don't like it, because honestly, it took me 3 or 4 years, and we're talking literally hundreds of attempts to like it, because I was not going to give up. Yes was my band, and I knew there was something special there, because side 1 I really liked pretty much right from the get-go. So I stuck with it, man. But if I had not listened to it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times to try to learn to like it, I would have been like the rest of the Yes fans that said it was terrible. This album hit #1 in the UK because there was a postal strike. So the record stores couldn't mail in the actual sales figures. So for some reason that allowed Tales, based on its pre-orders, to be #1 in the UK, which is pretty cool. I think it hit #6 in the US. Which is just mind-blowing. But, back to the whole thing about one song per side and, that's just too much, that's excess. I don't hear any single person on planet Earth complaining about Soft Machine 3rd having 4 songs on a double album. I don't hear not one person on Earth complaining about Godspeed You Black Emperors, Lift Your Skinny Fingers Like Antennas. That's the same structure. Or how about Mike Oldfield, Incantation? Same exact thing. 4 sides, 1 song on each side. Only Yes got hammered for it. They're the only ones that had to, apologize. Oh, we're getting too pretentious. No, it's prog rock. It's perfect.
I think
no apologies.
I think the other thing is that when you approach an album like this, because there are so many tales online about it, you need to empty the cup that you've got in front of you. You need to get rid of, it's like this. You need to have an empty slate, blank piece of paper, and listen to it with an open mind. And also, if you're saying to someone, play this track, or this is a single I really like, I think, and it's 3-4 minutes long or 10 minutes long, you can get through that. But this needs your undivided attention. You can't go out and make a cup of tea halfway through. You need to sit down and listen to it, and with an open mind. And I think if you do that, that's when the magic appears.
And that's the thing. There is no record that I have ever put on for the first or second time and not had some kind of preconceived notion. Yeah. Whether it's whether it's the press kit or the bio or whatever type of hype that's been going on, you always go in with expectations, right? So that's where sometimes, the record that you need will appear exactly when you need it, right? And you may not be in the right headspace for Tales from Topographic Oceans today, maybe not tomorrow, but at some point in your life, you will be, man. And like you said, if you're in that right headspace, put it on. It's going to change your life. It absolutely will. It's sheer oral perfection. I love every note. I love everything about it. And like I said, Rick Wakeman, man. Listen to it again, Rick. You'll see I'm right and you're wrong. You've been wrong for 50 years about Tales.
Well, I think one of the things that will happen is because I didn't know you were going to mention this, and it was only out because I've been playing it, is that I wonder how many people after watching this video are going to play this either because for maybe the first time for a long time, or maybe for the first time ever.
That's what excites me about having a YouTube channel, Phil, is, I talk about these records, whether they're old records I've heard a million times or new records that I've really, really learned to love, is, being able to share my excitement and my passion and my thoughts about this music. And, if you're a genuine person, a real person, like a Phil Aston or myself, people start trusting you, right? They know you're not just saying stuff to get views or, to try to build an audience. They know you're saying stuff from the heart. People can tell the genuine article. People are not dumb, man. People are pretty smart, actually. I would say in general, most people watching this are probably smarter than me. So they can probably figure out, whether I'm being a big old phony or whether I'm speaking from the heart. And when I talk about the music I'm passionate about, I get a little crazy, I start moving my arms, my face gets red and all this kind of crazy stuff because it's real, man. That's why I started a channel. That's why we're doing this, because we love this music. And that is an exciting thought that there's somebody out there watching this video who hasn't listened to Tales in 30 or 40 years or maybe never. And they're going to experience it for the very first time. Man, I wish I were you. I wish I were you.
Exactly, because that's the thing, isn't it? If a 22-year-old is watching this now, and you're going to listen to Tales of Topographic Oceans for the first time, that must be a wonderful thing to hear it for the first time now, and with everything else that you've heard coming up to this point. Because obviously, when we heard it for the first time, there wasn't as much music around. There wasn't all these Frost or Riverside, all these new prog, big train, and everything. This is hearing Topographic Oceans amongst all these contemporary prog bands, and how it still
towers over them. And you mentioned Riverside, you mentioned Big Train. Yeah. These bands are just incredibly great, beyond words great. They can't touch Tales. They can't touch it. But that's the thing. That's the beauty of going back to the classics is, there's a reason why prog music is still resonating today. A good 55 years after In the Court of the Crimson King. It's because it's good. That's why, people go back and listen to King Crimson and Pink Floyd and Jethro Tull and yes, Genesis ELP for a reason, because they're the best bands that ever existed on this planet. Right. And that's why we still talk about them. And that's why the newer prog bands, the good ones, learned their lessons. Right. I mean, if you were a classical composer, you'd study Mozart. You have to study Mozart or else you can't be as good a composer as you want to be. Same thing with these prog bands. They're studying Tales. They're studying Larks, Tongues, and Aspic, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Absolutely. I was listening to Jim Godfrey talk about the new Frost album, which is a double concept album. Yep. And he said the first thing he did was he listened to Lamb Lies Down on Broadway and The Wall and took notes. Okay, I'm doing a double concept album. Yeah, why not go to the best and take a couple notes, right? And learn from the very best. And that is what the greats of yesteryear really are. I mean, you can't improve them. There's no way you can do any better, but you can do your own thing. And that's why I get so excited about bands like Big Train and Beardfish, Ritual.
Oh, yeah.
There's so the list is just almost endless. Andy Tillison and the Tangent.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Brilliant. Absolutely fantastic.
On and on it goes. I love modern prog, but yeah, there's just a special place for those. It's called the Big Six for a reason. The greats of the 70s, the great British prog rock, greatest music ever written. Here we are 55 years later. We're still talking about it, Phil. And that's my mission in life, is to make sure that, 100 years from now, people are still talking about The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway and Tales from Topographic Oceans and all the great records in the prog rock canon. Because honestly, if you like good music, why aren't you listening to prog? It doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense at all. I think prog gets that bad reputation sometimes, but all prog rock is, Phil, is music, only better. That's what prog rock is.
Did you have just before we finish? Did you have in the UK in the 80s? prog disappeared. Now, because obviously I was living through that period. A lot of people have said to me, Phil, no, it didn't. There was IQ, there was Marillion, but there wasn't. It was not. It was off the radar.
Yeah.
I was playing in a band called a heavy metal band called the Handsome Beasts, and Marillion supported us. And I remember looking at them thinking, they sound like Genesis. What they're doing? It's 1980. It's 19. It's the 80s. What are they thinking of? But
this is how I spent the 80s.
Yeah, you showed that the other day on the review show. But I think it's come where we live now. Me and you talking in 2024. Progressive rock has never been healthier, I think, than it is now. You've got all the 5 classic albums that you've brought into this show today, and all the new bands we've also mentioned. It is the best time, isn't it, really, for prog
really
fans?
Is. Not only do you have that entire universe of great artists out there, but we're really blessed in that we have YouTube, where we have, a Phil Aston. You've got the Prog Corner. You've got Sea of Tranquility. You've got the great Andy Edwards. You've got Barry Robinson over there on Classic Album Channel, where, we're just talking about prog rock on YouTube, and thousands of people are watching our videos. It's exciting. It's really encouraging. We've got a beautiful glossy Jerry Ewing and his boys, his crew out there, Prog Magazine, absolutely incredible. You know how cool that would have been if we had something like that in the 70s?
It would have been amazing. I remember when Prog Magazine appeared, I thought, wow, there's going to be a magazine about prog after all this time. It wasn't
all this time.
It's
amazing. It's a great time to be alive.
Yeah.
And you combine all that with the easy accessibility of finding the music. Back in the day, man, you'd hear about this weird, obscure German band or something. I'm living in the boonies of Wisconsin. There's no way I'm ever going to hear that record, let alone see it in a record store and buy it. Now, if you hear about something, just go online, check it out. If you like it, order it. Boom. It's a great time to be alive. It's a great time to be a prog rock fan. And the fact that these prog rock bands that are coming out over the past 20 or 30 years, they're putting out some incredible music. Prog didn't die in the 80s. It had a serious problem in the 80s, though. But there were still bands out there.
It was still there. It was just you couldn't find it. Whereas now, because we don't have to rely on a specific media source, we can go find it ourselves. Whereas
I think the only exception in the 80s, I mean, Rush kind of went away from the prog, but
so did Yes.
Rush had a very lucrative decade. And Marillion had actually had a couple radio hits.
They did, yeah.
So they were a little more than a blip on the radar screen, but you mentioned like IQ and 12th Night and Jadis and Palace Pendragon. They had a little bit of a rougher time because they didn't have any, singles getting played on the radio.
That's right.
But it was a bad time for prog, and I get it because I look at myself as the archetypal prog fan. Born in 1962 in the Midwest of America with a musical family. I was primed, right? I was playing classical guitar since I was 5. So my ears and my brain were ready for prog, right? And, so you get into it and you realize that you go through the 70s and the greatest music ever written and all that stuff. And then the 80s happen and you want something new. You want something exciting. I stopped listening to prog. I think the 1-2 punch of Yes Tormato and ELP Love Beach was just about enough for me because I was really getting into bands like The Clash, XTC, Talking Heads, who were putting out all this really cool, interesting music. And then I'm listening to, my Yes, and they're talking about, the circus of heaven. And, so I moved on. So I know I'm pretty typical of a lot of prog fans that we started exploring other things in the 80s. Luckily, we came back to the prog. I know I came back to the prog in 2000, 2001 when the great supergroup Transatlantic formed.
Oh, yes.
That's what did it for me. Because I'd been listening to the bands that were in Transatlantic, right? Marillion, Spock's Beard, Dream Theater, Flower Kings. I'd listened to all their music and it was all right. But then when Transatlantic hit, man, the sum of the parts just so much greater. And I became 100%. And invested into prog once again. So I've been back into prog for like 24 years now.
Must mention that first Transatlantic album, We All Need Some Light. I mean, oh wow,
beautiful,
isn't it?
Big Neil Morris fan.
Yeah,
I had him on the channel a couple months ago talking about his new album.
I had him here as well. Isn't he a wonderful
that's
guy?
Right, you did.
Isn't he a wonderful
awesome
guy?
Yeah.
Wonderful
if it weren't for Neil, I don't think I'd be here today doing this.
Really?
Yeah. It was Neil Morris. It was Transatlantic. He changed everything for me. There's just something about his cheesy Christian shtick that's kind of me. I'm a cheese ball. I'm a weird guy who's also Christian, and just something about Neil's approach just totally connected with me. And I've just been in the prog 100%. I try to listen to other forms of music now, Phil. It's really hard, man. I looked at my YouTube, and iTunes and all the stuff I listen to on Spotify, and I'm like at 98.5% prog. That's all I'm listening to now. I need to branch out again. I need to listen to some other things, but man, there's so much great prog, and I get like hundreds of albums sent to me every month, so it's hard to keep up. But it's a dirty job, but somebody's got to do it. Like I say, I listen to all the prog, so you don't have to.
Well, Scott, it's been an absolute delight to have you on the channel. And so it's the Prog Corner. Anyone watching this who doesn't know who Scott is, I think you do, probably anybody. If you don't, this is Scott. So it's the Prog Corner. And what have you got coming up on your channel soon? Anything?
I got some exciting stuff this Sunday. We're talking about, we do a live show every Sunday at 11 o'clock Eastern time. Yep. So that's 4 p.m. British Standard Time. Live, we've had Annie Haslam on the show.
Oh, wow.
We've had all kinds of, stellar guests. This week, I've got Kevin Dodson from the Madrigal Project, and we're talking about the 10 best prog rock comebacks of all time. That's going to be fun. That's a subject I've never talked about. Bands that went away and then came back. So that's going to be a lot of fun because my guest is one of those, because his band Madrigal put out a couple albums in the 80s and then disappeared, and he's got a brand new album out. And then next week, Tuesday, Phil, it's the big one, man. Tuesday, December 10th, the top 25 prog rock albums of 2024 will drop. It's the big one. It's the big episode everybody looks forward to. I look forward to it every year. Because I have fun, my OCD. I just like ranking stuff, man. I just love slotting stuff 1, 2, 3, 4. It makes my brain happy. So that's Tuesday. The top 25 prog albums of 2024. Who's going to be at number 1? Oh, I don't know. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I'm doing my countdown to top 25 albums and box sets as well before Christmas this time. Normally I end up doing it after Christmas, but I'm going to try and do it this time the other side. But Scott, thank you so much for being a guest tonight. It's been fantastic, and and I'm going off now to play. Oh yeah,
do it. And I'm going to be dancing with some rattlesnakes, Phil. I'm dancing with them snakes. Oh, yeah. The people on my channel like, why you dance with them rattlesnakes? Because I got the armor of God on me. Nothing's going to get me. These snakes aren't going to bite me, Phil. I'm bulletproof, man. Nothing's going to touch me. The power of prog will save you, and it'll save all of us.
Excellent. Well, take care, Scott, and we'll talk again in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Cheers. Phil.
Thank you. Bye. A huge thank you to my guest, Scott Lade from the Prog Corner, for this second episode of Meet the Collector. I love that. Scott is so enthusiastic and so knowledgeable about the bands that he loves, and he's so enthusiastic about progressive rock. Were there any of the albums a surprise? They weren't a surprise. I guess the bands weren't, but some of the albums that Scott landed on might be, because of the UK US type thing. I expected ELP to be in there. Brain Salad Surgery, that is my favorite ELP album, but I kind of thought it might be Tarkus. I know in the UK a lot of people like the first album, but it was great to talk about works. King Crimson was interesting because the album that Scott picked isn't the one I kind of naturally navigate to. Jethro Tull was even more interesting because my favourite is Minstrel of the Gallery, and I prefer the kind of Aqualungs and stand-up stuff like that. But it was interesting because in the UK, the albums that were just one track, Passion Play, and gosh, the other one, Thick as a Brick, which is on the, gosh, which was the first remaster I bought by Jethro Tull, and I think the first super deluxe edition, wasn't it? In the UK, I think having an album that was one track, and even hearing the band how they played it live the first time, thinking it'd be good to feel someone clap or applaud us. But the fact that the way Scott mentioned those albums has made me want to play them again. Lamb Lies Down, yeah. I think for Genesis, it is the masterwork. It is the one that I go towards when I want to really immerse myself in the band. Tales of Topographic Oceans, number 1, his favorite album of all time. That was a surprise. I thought it was going to be Yes, but I was convinced it was going to be Close to the Edge. It nearly always is, isn't it? Or I thought if it's not Close to the Edge, it's going to be the Yes album. Fragile, perhaps. But Tales, that was a surprise. And it was complete coincidence that my copy was just behind me. Because it's a difficult album. It is the one used as an example of why prog rock had to die in the 70s, or why it should have died. It never did, of course. It never went away. But it is a very interesting album. It is a challenge for some people. But I've got this. I've got the Blu-ray. I've got the Super Deluxe Edition. But it is something that, if you approach with an open mind, it gives a lot back. And it is a shame that Rick Wakeman was never really a fan. But actually, there are very, very strong moments in that. And it will be wonderful to know whether, because we have 2 people on YouTube both talking about the Tales of Topographic Oceans by Yes, will more people now go and play this for the first time in a few years, could be decades, or even listen to it for the first time? Let me know in the comments what you thought of Scott's choices, what you might have chosen instead, and what do you think of Tales by Yes? It's a great piece of artwork, if nothing else. But no, there's some great tracks on there. So thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all of your support. Become a patron, a YouTube member. Get to see all my videos before anyone else. Get access to the private Facebook group, private WhatsApp group, virtual meetings twice a month. Remember, Music is the Healer and the Doctor. There's a podcast with artist interviews, the website, wherever there's a social media channel, Now Spinning Magazine are there as well. Take care. Remember, music is the healer and the doctor. And I'll talk to you all very, very soon.